Hi there, welcome to another episode of the Play Out podcast. Your host is myself, Scott Mclachlan, and once again I'm joined by two good friends. It was going to be three, but we wish Jamie well, he's not feeling too well. And Tim and Phil are here to discuss Pompey's recent fortunes and look ahead to our next three matches. Welcome, gents, how are we all?
Evening.
Cold. Evening.
Yes, it is. There was snow in the air today in Chichester. I'm sure there was. I don't know if there would be in Pompey. That hill gets in the way, doesn't it?
There was snow, but it was sludge. It was just
Okay.
raining sludge.
Well, we've got a sludgy Christmas to look forward to then, I guess. So good to see you back, Tim, as well. We haven't seen you for a few weeks.
Thanks, mate. Yeah,
it's good to have you back. No, good. Well, good to see you again. So Pompey rattled off three matches in quick succession at the start of November, and first up was an away trip to Hull. The lineup included a start for Matt Ritchie and also Kusini Yengi, but Pompey started off slow once again, and João Pedro scored in the 11th minute. And the rest of the half, Pompey huffed and puffed and relied on Schmidt to make a couple of good saves, but Hull didn't press on, and when the half-time whistle came, it was only 1-0. Almost right for the kickoff, some great work by Callum Lang allowed him to cross from the right, and Murphy's deflected strike went in off a post. Pompey's tails were up and produced a much better performance than recent matches, and were very unlucky not to grab all 3 points when a blistering run by Murphy produced a save, which was then pounced on by Lang, and somehow his shot was turned onto the bar by the Hull keeper who was going backwards. So the points were shared, but Pompey's fans were impressed by a very good second half. On then to Plymouth 4 days later, and Pompey again impressed for much of the match. They had one goal ruled out for offside, and when Ogilvy shot, he really should have hit the back of the net. But his shot from a pulled back cross was blocked on the line, and the rebound from Paul was denied by an offside flag. At the end of the half, a great cross by Murphy saw a full-length diving header by Matt Ritchie, saved really well by the goalkeeper. And Pompey went in half-time without scoring, but when playing really well on top. In the second half, Plymouth improved, but Pompey was still pressing for the opener. A vicious pot shot was well saved before Schmidt pulled off another impressive save to deny Plymouth a certain goal. The winning goal, unfortunately, came from a long ball, which deceived McIntyre, and then Paul was brushed off the ball by Omafemi, and he was left with an easy finish to condemn Pompey to yet another loss. Genuinely, Pompey deserved much more from that game, and the fans were again heartened by the level of performance, but not the result. And that had to change quickly, though, and the following Saturday gave Pompey a chance to turn their fortunes around. Preston came to Fratton Park, but the incredible news was that Colby Bishop would start the game on the bench, and little did anyone know what a fairy tale afternoon it would turn out to be. Not just that news stunned fans, but the team included Marlon Pack playing at centre-back, partnering Paul, with McIntyre on the bench. So it was assumed to be a tactical switch. Pompey started strongly and had two chances from corners, and when a third was cleared way out to Murphy, who was 30 yards from goal, the whole of Fratton Park seemed to urge him to shoot, and what a strike he produced, arrowing one into the bottom corner. Then just before half-time, Ogilvy scrambled another corner into the net from 3 yards to give Pompey a well-deserved 2-0 lead. A corner played a big part in Preston's goal early in the second half, and a cleared corner was sliced back in for the Preston forward to tuck away. Pompey really needed a lift. The game was slipping away, and it was down to Schmidt again to make a point-blank save to stop Preston equalising. But cometh the hour and cometh the man. Bishop came on in the 78th minute, and Fratton Park erupted. 10 minutes later, the fans went wild again as Lang was brought down for a penalty, and he unselfishly handed the ball to Bishop, who was not going to miss on his dream comeback. Pompey finally got their home win and clawed their way off the bottom of the championship table. So there we go, fairy tale afternoon, which we'll cover a bit later. But it started at half-time at Hull. It seemed as if, I don't know what happened at half-time, but the team seemed to really sort of improved massively in that second half and produced patterns of play and performances that we hadn't really seen in the previous 2 or 3 games. I mean, even when we won at QPR, we didn't really play that well. So, what do we think was behind the halftime resurgence there?
Yeah, good question. Good question, really, isn't it? It's a little while ago now. I'm trying to think. Did we actually make any substitutions at halftime or anything that did it? Because it was a night and day performance between first and second half, wasn't it? First half, you're just thinking like, oh gosh, this is just another game that's going to drift by and end up in defeat. And by the end of it, I thought we played superbly and probably should have got the 3 points, really. So yeah, it was a massive turnaround. Hopefully, it's down to Massinho and his halftime instructions.
The much maligned Massinho, Phil.
Well, not by me.
No, you put up a very, very, very stalwart defence of him in the last pod, so I'm sure that's going to continue.
I'd love to know what you said. I think I remember when the Cowleys joined, and we had these sort of managerial masterclass YouTube videos of them pushing little counters around. I'd love to see the equivalent of what happened at half time with Messina, because I think that would be quite a masterclass to show to sort of aspiring young managers how to turn something around in 15 minutes.
Yeah, it probably didn't involve counters, but perhaps a bit of pointing and shouting. You may imagine,
maybe, and hair dryers.
Well, yeah. Well, possibly. It doesn't seem that kind of man. He does get angry, though. You can tell after some of the losses this season that he's been absolutely steaming and has barely kept it together in the interviews after the game. But, I think also, as I said in the preamble there, I think we obviously had Yengi make his first start of the season, I think, and Richie make his first start of the season, but it didn't quite click in that first half. So obviously we had, I think it was Murphy on the left, Richie on the right, with Lang supporting the striker through the middle. So we weren't really playing with sort of a playmaker number 10. It's more sort of a split striker or maybe even two strikers in certain situations. So it was a bit of a change. But it was Lang who made the goal, and I think Murphy did his best to miss it, didn't he, really?
Yeah, it was a great shot, wasn't it? Came off some part of his leg and ended up going off the defender and into the net. So, yeah, who cares? It went in.
Yeah.
I think Murphy's been good these last few games. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, it's a classic they all count sort of goal,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you got it on target, and that's what matters. You know, what happens after that, it doesn't really matter, does it? You know, it's it was going towards the goal and eventually found its way in off the post. So
you've got to buy a ticket if you want to win a raffle. There you go.
That's very true, Phil.
Exactly. You've got to struck it sweetly and put it straight onto the crossbar and over. So
Well, he showed us how to do that in the Preston game, didn't he? So we'll talk about that a bit later. But there was obviously green shoots of possible recovery there in Pompey's performances, because I think in the end most people were gutted that we didn't win that game. I think Murphy should have put his chance away when he burst through, but even after that, I don't know how the goalkeeper got his hand to it after Lang poked it towards the goal, and then of course Omani launched himself in the air to do an overhead kick from 6 yards out and completely missed the ball. So it was a bit of a comedy of errors after that. What do we think maybe triggered that performance? Because I don't think, Hull I think Hull made it easy for us and sat back, and I think that's what their manager intimated at the end of the game. He was disappointed in their performance in the second half. But clearly we had upped our game, Phil.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it's a sort of cliched, but I think there's possibly sort of an element of us thinking, well, they're there for the taking. I think we sometimes go to the sort of big stadiums or sort of the sort of, I don't know, bigger teams in the league and get a little bit intimidated. And we've seen that in some of the midweek away games where we've kind of just not performed. But I think we sort of coming at half time, still in the game, obviously. I don't know, maybe it was just as simple as that, just a case of, well, look, the game's there for us to win, or we've got to win, get a point out of. We just got to go and grab it with both hands.
I think that's a very good point, Tim. If you ever look at it, quite a few teams have spent quite a number of years in the Championship after having been in the Premiership. And Hull are one of these teams that are kind of have that Championship pedigree. They've never really threatened on going up, I don't think, in the season since they've come down. But they're an established Championship side. So do you think we get intimidated by that? Do we think that these teams should be better than us just because they've been around the league for a while?
I think we might do, and I think as fans we might get a bit nervy when we play them sometimes as well. I think it's good that the fans have kind of stuck behind the team so well for the most part, really. Obviously, there's always a couple of dissenting voices, but it feels like the majority of people are still firmly behind them and want to support the team, get behind them, and cheer them on in everything they do. So I think, you look at someone like Hull, and they've obviously got a bit more money to spend. For certain, Abu Kamara went there in the summer, but I think it's also one of the things over the last three games that I've kind of noticed is the Matt Ritchie's performances as well. I think he's really sort of shown what we hoped we were getting at the start of the year. It's maybe taken him a bit of time to get up to full speed of playing 90 minutes all the time and everything, but I think he's looked like a good quality addition to the squad in the last few games and really adds something for us.
And it's apparently that was the first time since 2021 he played back-to-back 90 minutes, which was I didn't realise. It's quite an achievement. 3 years out from that sort of level. And I think, as Tim says, he's. I've often asked the question, why on earth did we sign him? But I think the last couple of games we've really seen that. We've really seen both in his play, but also the way he conducts himself on the pitch. I know we'll get on to Terry Devlin soon, but I think the way he almost sort of coached Devlin through some of the tougher parts of the game, I think was a credit to him. And interestingly, I was listening to an interview with Marlon Pack, and he was talking about leadership and captaincy, and Marlon said, I'm more of a sort of a lead by example, a lot quieter on the pitch. He said, but Matt's the one that does all the shouting.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. I was gonna cover Richie during the Preston game, but we'll I think also you beat me to the punch there, Tim. I was going to also not only ask about Richie's performance, but the fact that we've got what seems to be a solid centre midfield pairing in Dazelle and Potts. We were a little bit despairing about Dazelle earlier on in the season, and I think we sort of quietly dismissed him as someone who's a half decent championship player, but wasn't really going to pull up any trees. But I think him and Potts have found the early spring shoots of a decent partnership in the middle there, and I think we saw that definitely in that second half of that Hull game starting to come together.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think Dazelle's sort of really come back into a bit of form at the moment as well. Potts seems to be improving all the time, which is great. Could be a great prospect in the future. I don't know if it's with us or not. He's only on loan, but I think another interesting thing could be, obviously we'll cover Devlin more in a little bit, but he is really a midfielder as well. So there's two other right backs at the club. Could there potentially be a space for Terry Devlin in midfield and Zach or Williams to come in at right back again? Should it be needed?
I think we've discussed this before, and I think Jamie's said this on occasions that and Phil as well, that it's a horses for courses thing. I think he's brought Devlin in because he's realised that we are struggling on that right hand side, and Devlin's shown himself to be completely implacable. He just seems to be 110% work. He's not the most gifted footballer in the squad by a long way, but my God, he's got a lot of heart and a lot of commitment, and I think Richie, as you say, Phil, has been bringing that on that right hand side, and they're having a really good defensive partnership. There was one point in the Preston game in the second half where Richie had joined an attack, and I think it was about 60 odd minutes. So we're getting to that point where he's probably really starting to feel it, and he literally sprinted. So the ball got played out to the left back he's supposed to be marking, and Preston were making good gains up the left hand side. And Richie honestly did this lung bursting run for about 50, 60, 70 yards. And honestly, his fists were pumping, his arms were pumping, and the neck, you can see the veins bulging out on his neck just for him to get into position. He wasn't trying to close anyone down. He was just trying to get back into his defensive shape position. And that really impressed me because, for all his skill on the ball, he's clearly not a player who's here to look like I used to play in the Premiership. He's here to work hard, and the team is benefiting from that, I think. So overall disappointment for Hull, I think. Although we were impressed by the second half performance, and then that went on to the Plymouth game, where we were robbed, basically, weren't we, Phil?
Oh, absolutely. I think if there's a game that you could dominate a dominating 1-0 defeat, I think that was it, really.
Yeah,
it was absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, it is a classic. There was a classic. You've got to score when you're on top, and I think if we'd had I don't want to go too down on Yengi, but if we'd had a half competent striker up front, we'd have won that. I think what really frustrated me with that game was he's got all of the tools to be a top striker. He just needs to put it together. And I think I think that was a game where I think we had both. There was Ritchie, there was Murphy, even Ogilvie put some really, really teasing balls into the box, and the ones you'd expect to have a sort of a predatory striker getting on the end of, and he just sort of, I don't know, just didn't give that extra little bit, like didn't throw himself at the ball in the way Murphy did when a ball came across, and Murphy was absolutely busting a gut to get, didn't quite connect with the ball, but you thought he's trying to. And I found it so frustrating because we delivered some of the best balls into the box I've seen all season during that game, and came away with nothing. So yeah, very frustrating.
Yes, Tim. So I was watching the highlights of all the games, and if you have a look at the João Pedro goal against Hull, he does that classic movement. So we've all seen it on Match of the Day, the out and in movement where the striker goes behind the defender and then darts in front of him. And that's what Pedro did to McIntyre, I believe it was. He went, just before the ball went in, he moved to go behind the defender, and then he lunged in front of him and got to the ball and made a good finish. Now, Yengi, as you say, Phil, I don't think he knows how to do that. He doesn't know how to go to that near post ball. And if he did, he probably would have got at least a couple of goals against Plymouth, surely.
Yeah, I think with Yengi, we're kind of I don't know. You hear some people sort of saying, "Oh, he looks a bit disinterested, a bit lazy, and stuff like that." I wouldn't kind of go to those sort of lengths or anything. I think he's had a bit of a stop and start season with injuries and travel and things like that. I think we kind of we saw him obviously perform better in games last season, and we're not seeing that replicated yet this season. So again, I'm hoping that he's another one, a bit like we've mentioned with likes of Dazelle and people who have improved, and Ritchie improved as the season's going on, and hopefully we can see that. But obviously, it's encouraging that there are other striking options coming back into the side as well.
Well, that's the thing. It's pressure, isn't it? If only. I mean, let's not get too gritty. If only Colby was ready a week earlier, he might have got a couple of goals against Plymouth. But obviously we had no idea he was about to be launched onto the Championship. But I think with the Plymouth game, the most disappointing thing was the goal. We had two chances to deal with it, and both centre backs let themselves down. The McIntyre underrun the header and it went straight over the top of him. And then it was was Paul fouled? I didn't think it at the time. I know Mousinho tried to make claims at the end of the game that it was a foul all day long, but I just Obafemi's smaller than him. I think he just levered him off the board, didn't he, Tim?
Yeah, he just manoeuvred him off the board, and I have to admit, I watched on a slightly sketchy stream, so I didn't have a perfect view of the game. But I did see that bit, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with it at the time. I thought he just outmuscled him, and it was a good kind of way to just a bit of a shoulder charge, old fashioned, stuck it in the net. Nothing wrong with that, really. If that had been the other way around and Yengi had done it, we'd be happy.
I was going to say, I think Mousinho did. I think he did an admirable defence of his players. Then, really, I mean, Mousinho was a centre back, and I think as a centre back, if he'd been muscled off the ball like that, he'd be annoyed with himself. So I think he did it more he sort of protested more to sort of protect them than anything.
Yeah, and that's what you'd expect a good manager to do, isn't it?
Absolutely.
He would obviously have read them the right act privately, but publicly he's going to defend them. But I for all of our great play, to lose a goal so softly like that, I just was, and that was as you said, Phil, the most heartbreaking, gutting thing is that, and it was a scummer as well. So it just didn't go right at all. But thankfully, only a few days later, unbeknownst to everybody, we had several rays of light coming out of Fratton Park. And when did you hear that Bishop was on the bench? Did you? You're a little bit closer to the club than most people feel. Was it a complete surprise to everybody?
Oh, it was a complete surprise. So at the Supporters Trust Q&A session, they were talking. Well, they were saying someone asked a question about Colby, and John had said, well, he's back on the grass this week. He's been running. He's doing a bit of running this week. So yeah, we're hoping to see him. And they were alluded to sort of January. There was absolutely no idea. There was no suggestion whatsoever that he was going to be back. And we were in the pub before the game, Staggeringly Good Brewery. I'll give them a plug because it's the best place to go pre-match.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we can get some sponsorship for the pod for that.
Well, it could do. Yeah, I'll if you say it properly, Phil. So let's do the advert properly. Go on.
Brought to you in association with Staggeringly Good Brewery.
There we go. Job done. There's a few tinnies each, I think.
Yes. So we were in the pub, and someone said, "Have you seen the team line?" Have you seen the team lineup? And you sort of, "Oh yeah, let's have a look." And it was, Pack's back then. Well, who's playing at centre back? No, not that. Yeah, but we haven't got enough centre backs. No, not that. Look on the bench. It's like, Bishop. No, we thought it was a misprint at first. I think it's the only time you're going to find that the captain comes back into the team and is asked to play left centre back, where he's admitted he's played as the right in a 3 before, but never on the left. Like that wasn't even close to being the story of the day. And so
no,
I think even then with Bishop, that's really great, and he's got him on the bench. No one thought he'd come on at any point, and then when he came on. Where we are in our lofty position of the Fratton end, there was a sort of movement, and someone's going, Bishop's getting his tracksuit top off. And no, it's not. Yeah, it is. Look. So grown men were crying.
There was a murmur around the ground when he was getting ready to come on, and I mean, we're doing Murphy a disservice because there's a few things that happened beforehand before that. So let's get our props done to Murphy and Ogilvie for getting the goals. So the obviously Murphy produced this thunderbolt strike from 30 yards. I mean, how did it look from the Fratton end? I wish I'd seen it end on because where I'm in the North Lower, I'm pretty much roughly in line with where he hit it from. And everyone around me was going, shoot! And I had my head in my hands going, no, that's going to go and hit the scoreboard. Don't do it. And then obviously whack, and it went right in the bottom corner and everyone went bonkers. So how did it look from the Fratton end? I presume you were there, Tim. Sorry.
Well, I'm in the North Upper these days.
Of course, yes.
I'm kind of like level with the penalty area of the Fratton end sort of thing in the North Upper.
So you had a terrible view then?
Yeah, I kind of like led round the post and it looked great from what I could see, yeah.
Okay, we'll have to rely on Phil then.
I mean, it looked, obviously from where I am, right at the back of the Fratton end, you could see quite how far out he was. And I think to call it unexpected was probably an understatement. But I will use this as an opportunity to bring in our good friend Wingerman. Good. Obviously a very big fan of Josh Murphy. So he'd been berating him before this, and he turned. I didn't hear him say this, but my friend Andy did. He turned round and he said, "You can tell they don't rate Murphy because they don't even want him in the box for a corner." And my mate Andy jokingly said, and I didn't hear him say this, so he might be claiming this as a sort of a bit of fake news. But he apparently said to him, no, but he's there waiting for the knockdown because he's going to score. And then of course it went in, and we all piled onto Wingerman, and who not only wouldn't accept that it was a fantastic goal. He also criticised Murphy for another couple of great bits of play. One of them where he managed to get himself back to cover the right back position and put in this fantastic tackle. And he turned around and said, "I don't know what he's doing there. That's not his position." And then my favourite one, possibly even more than the goal, was I don't know if you remember, he chased the winger back from the halfway line and got in a tackle down near the corner flag. And Wingerman turns around and said, if he tackled him at the start, he wouldn't have to chase after him.
Well, so Murphy's definitely not winning with this guy, is he? No, he's never going to win with this guy. No.
But I thought Murphy again had a good game, very good game. And you know that it's not always going to come off for him, because if he was a wingers by nature are inconsistent, and if you're a consistent winger, you're not going to be playing at the bottom half of the championship. So he doesn't hide. I think he had a great game.
Yeah, I agree with that, Tim. So we'll go on to Ogilvie's goal. I hope you had a better view of that than Murphy's. But we we'd had 2 or 3 chances from corners. Obviously, the unexpected one from the outside of the box from Murphy first, but obviously it was a scrappy one, but it went in. Ogilvie has that ability to pop up the far post, doesn't he? I think he scored at least. I think that's his 3rd goal this season, isn't it? From that position.
It's definitely at least 2nd, if not 3rd. Yeah, he's done really well, and he popped up with a few last year, didn't he? So
yeah,
he's very decent in those sort of situations. I think the nice thing about it was a 2nd goal. We were playing well, like you said about the Plymouth game. You got to score when you're having your spells when you're on top. We were well on top in that first half. We deserved to go in winning, and we deserved to go in with the 2-0 lead, really. So, funny enough, you were saying about people calling things and saying, what's he doing outside the box and things like that. Bloke in front of me, we've been sat there together for years, sort of thing. So, turns around and goes like, "Oh, another corner. Are we ever going to score from a corner?" And the bloke to the right of me went, "Ogilvy's going to score at the back post." It was just fantastic. So we celebrated that one like wildly. It was just absolutely brilliant. So great sort of atmosphere, wasn't it? And that the whole game really. The remembrance bit at the start of the game was observed impeccably. Everyone's excited about Bishop being on the bench, 2-0 up at half time. It was just fantastic, wasn't it, at that point?
It was a good hour. It was a good hour. We struggled early in the second half, and obviously they got one back. And then Schmidt, I think he made it. He's really good at these reaction saves, isn't he? Close quarter reaction saves. I think he's made 4 or 5 of those since he's come into the team that have, you don't know where he pulls them out for, but clearly his reaction speed at saving is pretty good. And so we struggled, and then of course we needed the boost, and on comes Colby, and I mean the place just erupted, didn't it? When the Tannoy announcer said Colby Bishop, I mean it was the loudest I've heard in Fratton Park for years. It really was. It was terrific to be there, and then obviously 10 minutes later when Lang gets taken down from the penalty and he hands Bishop. I mean I've got some really good guys around me. Obviously, some of the London lot, Phil, who are around me, Andy, and Dave, and a few of the others sit near me. But I've got 3 guys who sit behind me: Joe and Rob, and the younger son. And Rob's hilarious. I mean, he was screaming at Lang not to give the ball to Bishop. He's going to miss it. He can't score it. It's impossible. And I said he is going to score it because it must be in the stars that he does it, because he comes back and then 10 minutes he gets a chance to score a penalty, and he rarely misses penalties. So, it was a very, very exciting match, and I think the club needed that, didn't it, as a whole? I think the club, the fans, the players, everyone needed that first home win. It was just an electric atmosphere and a brilliant place. Like I say, when Fratton Park's a good place to be, it's a really good place to be and really enjoyable. When we're losing every other week, it's not a very nice place to be. But the Saturday for the Preston game was absolutely terrific.
And props to Callum Lang for giving the ball to Colby, because Colby didn't go seeking the ball. That's what I thought was a really good sign, and a really good sign of sort of the spirit within the team. That he picked the ball up, went straight to him. I didn't see this, but and the replays on TV didn't show it, but apparently kissed him on the forehead, a bit like the sort of Bartes thing, and gave him the ball. And just thought it was a beautiful moment.
I thought Lang would be much shorter than Bishop, but there we go. Perhaps he jumped up a little bit, peck him on the bonce. So we're as it sits, I think Mousinho said it, the international break couldn't have come at a worse time. You want to keep that rolling, that rolling good feeling going, don't you? And we head up to Blackburn, which we'll discuss in a bit. So we're actually, if I have a look at the table, so Pompey are second from bottom.
We're 2 wins off of mid-table safety. We are.
Well, of course, and we'll discuss our run up to the New Year and Christmas in a minute. I've done some rough points tallies and think what I'd like to get to before we get to the 1st of January. But we're sat at second from bottom, 12 points. QPR not won in 7 or 8 or 9 games, down at their 10. Cardiff just above us, who've lost their last 2 games after some decent wins, and then Luton, Preston, Hull, Plymouth, Coventry and Oxford, and then Sheffield Wednesday and Norwich on there at 18, Stoke on 19 and 13th. So you're right, Phil, couple of wins and you're mid-table. But we've got Blackburn away. What I wanted to touch on, because obviously Colby coming back, they had to do a bit of jiggery pokery with the list to do with the FA. So of course, I think the accepted logic was that we retired Boat because he's out for the season, and then we brought Bishop in as one of the squad. And the FA allowed us to do that. That's why he could be enrolled to play before the 1st of January. But if we look towards January, I was going to go. I shamedly didn't go because I was too tired and relied on you, Phil, to give us updates for the PST meeting. It was quite an important meeting because obviously we hear from the boss, Michael Eisner, but also it had the three big hitters there. It had Rich Hughes, the chief executive, and John Massigno as the manager, all giving their views on things. And what was the main takeaways from the meeting, do you think, Phil?
Well, the first thing, obviously, we had the video from Michael and Eric sort of sitting there next to him. It was quite. It made for quite a funny shot because Michael was there in his sort of suit and Eric had his was all his branded merch on, and I think
dressed for the occasion.
Yes. Obviously, Michael was sort of was quite bombastic. He's as he famously said, "We're not going to get relegated." Period. I don't know whether that's because he still hasn't got the hang of any sport outside of America does have relegation and promotion, so he might not be aware of that. But it was quite interesting. They sort of rehashed quite a lot of other stuff. He managed to get another bit of praise from Mclachlan in, which was quite entertaining. Just before we spoke about anyone currently on the team or on the backroom staff.
He is the man who saved Portsmouth Football Club, as we all know, Phil.
The CEO of the year.
Yes.
But so the funny thing was that the atmosphere was quite odd. I think it was very supportive of the three people in the room because they could quite easily not have turned up for that for various reasons. They'd only got back at I think they got back at 1 a.m. After obviously the very deflating game, and I think people were very sort of respectful of the fact that they turned up and weren't afraid to answer questions or talk. I think after the video was shown, you could have heard a pin drop. There was like zero reaction to it, which is very odd because you'd either get. I was expecting either sort of some murmurs of discontent or the odd person sort of with a resounding round of applause sort of thing, but there was literally nothing. It was you could have heard a pin drop. So that was quite interesting.
A little bit awkward then, yeah.
A little bit, I'd say, yeah. But Donald, who's the chairman of the PST, sort of revelled in the sort of as a master of ceremonies, asking questions. I think asked some really good questions, which were not sort of shying away from the the sort of things that people wanted to ask about. I think there were questions about the kind of players that we brought in. I think one of the things everyone wanted to know about was Kamara, why he wasn't playing. I think Richard, had said about how it was big adapting to playing, sort of the men's football rather than the sort of the level at which he was playing. I think being in a new country, he said there were, various things like that. And then John sort of interjected quite sort of pointedly and said, I need players to come on who can affect the game. Now, I don't know whether that was particularly I don't know if it was a dig at Kamara or it was just him, sort of saying he's not ready. He's not ready. I think he's on the bench by the fact that we don't have many options on the bench. But that was sort of quite interesting. Michael had sort of talked about how we were going to bring in players in January, but kept saying loans, which loans equals groans, I think was the thing in the room. But Rich was sort of quite adamant that there was a potential to bring in players on a fee if necessary. A couple of interesting things they talked about. I think someone was sort of suggesting that the owners don't support him, and he said there's a point last season where we'd used up what we consider to be the budget, and he Rich said they wanted to bring in. So he said we needed a bit of experience. He said, and I contacted. He said I messaged them and I got a message back just saying do it. So they were, that I thought that was quite encouraging. That in that respect, they were talking about them being sort of quite supportive. I think we talked about Richie earlier. I think there's some talk about Richie being brought in, for his character as well as his experience. Usually there's a bloke. I remember 2 years in a row there was a guy who just couldn't get over the fact we'd sold Nigel Atangana, and he bang on about that. But
I remember one of those meetings. I went to remember what it's. As soon as you did the accent, I remembered him. Yeah.
And but this is a guy going. Said we'd have won. Basically, his kind of line was, "We'd have won last night if you hadn't got rid of Raggett and Morel." And Rich Hughes, I could see he was a bit annoyed, and he sort of said to this bloke, "Morel hasn't kicked a ball since he got injured, to not offer them contracts, and I'll stand by that." And I'd heard that last year that. Although Moutinho comes over as a thoroughly nice bloke, he's got a bit of a ruthless streak, and I think that ruthless streak sort of extended to those two players.
Well, I think you're going to need that as a manager, aren't you? You can't be indecisive, especially when it comes to building your squad for next season. So, Tim, we talked about the January transfer window there. So it's literally around the corner. We're only 6 weeks away from it, 6 or 7 weeks away from it. Who do you think will go, or who do you want to see go in order to free up some spaces? I mean, Devlin's obviously made a case for his.
He's got to stay, hasn't he, for the season?
Well, of course, obvious inclusion for the rest of the season. But who else on the fringes do you think we might see leave the club?
Well, I've been thinking about it since we were talking about Schmidt earlier. To be honest with you, is he now our number one? Is Archer now the reserve? Is Toby Stewart going to be the third choice keeper? And does that mean what does that mean for Norris? That's one of the things I was wondering what you guys thought of, because
well, they said that in the meeting, didn't they, Phil, that Schmidt is the number one, and it's without question he was brought in to be the number one.
Yeah, they didn't sort of explicitly say that, but they sort of said they said that they've ended up in a scenario with two number one goalkeepers, Norris and Schmidt. And I think there's been a couple of little snippets of Moutinho saying things like, "Well, Will's better than sitting on the bench," kind of thing. So I think that's kind of preparing I think as Tim says, is potentially preparing the ground for him to go, which will be a shame, because he was an integral part of our of a fantastic side. But as we were saying earlier, there's no room for sentiment.
Yeah.
No. Go on, Tim. So what about players like? Well, I think Stevenson's out, isn't he? Stevens has gone. Lowry's gone. They're not even in the squad. I don't think there's any opportunity. But and who else do you think might? I mean, Moxon's playing a little bit more recently. If Kamara's not going to be ready potentially before well into next year, we've got to keep someone like Moxon, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, could you see Kamara maybe going out on loan somewhere to get some games?
Possibly.
League 1 or 2, something like that, free up a space in the squad again if we're going to bring someone in. And when the other ones,
I think Kamara actually, he's under 21, isn't he? So he doesn't affect the squad numbers.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, I was just going to mention Blair as well. I think he could be,
Yeah, he's only 19, isn't he?
Yeah,
he's only 19. As I say, Tim, if we were to let's say we get 3 loan players in, where do you want to see them come in?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Really. I mean, I suppose the other thing would be like of the loan players we've got. I mean, I'm never quite sure how to say it. O'Mahony, however you pronounce the Irish fella from Brighton. O'Mahony, I think. Yeah. Again, I think he's looked quite sharp when he's been up front. Scored a couple of good goals for us, but is that something that they'd look at thinking, if there's quite a few bits to come together over the next month or so, aren't there, really? Like, how's Bishop's progress over the next month going to be? Does that mean that we might end up freeing up Omani to go back, and we're happy with what else other options we've got, or do we bring in somebody with a bit more experience rather than a teenager trying to get game time? I think a lot of it's going to come down to kind of like who's available, who can you get. I mean, looking at sort of last year, some loan signings. We had sort of Andrew in and what's the fellow, Pert Harris, wasn't it? We had come in.
Yep.
Is it going to be sort of players a bit like that again to sort of bolster, add a bit of quality? I suppose it's debatable whether they did that all the time, but it's really difficult to say who you want to go for, really. I guess if you're going to bring in 3 players, you might want to sort of almost hedge your bets and go midfielder, defender, forward, see what you can do with that sort of thing, really. But I think there's quite a few to come together over the next month.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I would send Silvera back. I don't know about his career at Middlesbrough, but he's been severely, underwhelming for us. And if your quote from Mousinho is right across the board, Phil, having players to come off the bench and affect the game, I can't remember Silvera ever affecting a game. He played half decent against Millwall when we played them in the cup at the start of the season.
I think if you go back to the Plymouth game, and we talk about when the goal scorer came on, that's affecting a game, isn't it? You bring someone on he played at Obafemi had played at Championship and Premier League level. To bring someone off the bench to do that, and you're kind of then bringing on Silvera, who doesn't look like he's going to affect a game. And but I think he played quite a lot of games. It's really, I always find it was quite a strange one, because he played quite a lot of games for Middlesbrough last season, and they've said, and then the word around is, but they really rate him. So he played a lot of games, they really rate him, and they've sent him out on loan to a rival in the division.
Well, I wouldn't say we're a rival. I would say we're a rival, but we're in the same league at least for the moment, at least. No, I think he's being harsh, but he's a waste of a space at the moment. He's a waste of a shirt. He's not doing anything and doesn't look like he's doing anything. And if we're going to bring somebody on to get minutes and to give experience, I'd rather it was Blair. I mean, interestingly, there was a video out today on the Pompey website which had the training build up to Blackburn, and there was quite a few bits of Blair in there doing some dribbling work and doing some shooting work. So I would hope that I think you were saying earlier on in the season, Phil, you'd like to see Kamara and Blair go on loan. I think if we're going to invest time and minutes into someone, it's got to be Blair and not someone like Silvera. If we're going to bring in someone on for 10, 15 minutes at the end of a game, I'd much rather see it was Blair than Silvera. So he can go back for me. So, to answer my own question, I think we do need a 3 strikers. So I think we either keep Omani or we send him back and get someone else in. It may be that Brighton want him back. I don't know. Central midfield, it'd be nice to have another option in there. And obviously centre back is where we're struggling. Although I keep saying, I've said this all season, I feel really sorry for Towler, and I don't know what's going wrong there, but I don't think in those first few games that he played, he looked any different to anyone else on the pitch in terms of his ability at this level. And I really, he doesn't. If you're bringing in Marlon Pack to play at centre back, if McIntyre's not fit and you've got Towler on the bench, I think that sends a big message to Towler to say that Mousinho doesn't rate him. Because he came in before Mousinho, didn't he? So he's not he's not a player he was involved in bringing to the club. So clearly, I think.
Remember, he's only 22 though. He's still in the grand scheme of things, he's still a kid. I thought the first game of the season against Leeds, I thought he got absolutely run ragged, and I really liked Towler, but I think Towler will benefit. Is another player that would benefit from a loan spell, play a whole season or half a season in League One. Playing every week, and he will benefit.
I don't disagree with that, Phil, but I think if you're going to use Leeds as an example, for the first 20, 30 minutes, everyone was getting run ragged. You could say Ogilvie, you could say Williams in the centre back role, which he was playing because we didn't have anyone else to play there, and we had nobody tracking the runners from midfield. So you had 6 or 7 people attacking 4 defenders half the time in that first half, and how we hung on and got to half time at 2-1, I have no idea. But I
think the way they've talked about Towler, I don't think it's the case of them not rating him.
He's just not at this level.
I just think they think that I think Mousinho said a couple of times that there's certain parts of his game he really has to work on, but they very much talk up his professionalism, or maybe that's making him more attractive to potential suitors. I don't know, but
possibly. Well, we're going to have to wrap up in a minute. So let's look ahead to the next. Well, we've got 3 games thick and fast. So we've got Blackburn on Saturday, and then next Wednesday we've got Millwall at home, and the following Saturday we are away at Swansea, of course, in South Wales. So, what's your hopes for those games? Because I think we can get 4 points, maybe 5. What do you think?
I'm predicting lots of goals.
Who for?
I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw at Blackburn.
Yeah, nice.
I'm going to have a 3-1 win at home to Millwall.
Good.
And then a 2-1 win away at Swansea.
Oh, I like that. If that comes true, I'm
always positive.
Let's hope Jamie listens to this and puts a tenner on those results and makes an absolute fortune. Right. What do you think, Phil?
Well, I think Blackburn's going to be a really tough game. They're not the team. They're not the team you want to play at this point in a weird sort of a way. If it had been the other way around, we played Millwall next. I think Millwall is a much more realistic chance of getting 3 points in. There'd be a bit more momentum, but we've kind of had this peak and then we're on a lull because we've not played, and they've got a good home record. But like Tim, I don't see any reason. I think the confidence is there. I don't see any reason why we can't go and get a draw. If we do, I think that's a great result. Even if people around us win, that's still a great result. I think, like Tim says, I go for the win against Millwall at home, and I'm going to just going to copy you, Tim, because I think the away win's got to come at some point. Why not at Swansea?
Oh, I think if you have a look at Blackburn, they've really struggled. At the start of October, they lost to Coventry and Plymouth, and then beat Swansea. But they've only won 1 game since, and that was Cardiff. So they're not on fire by any. They've had a terrible 6 or 7 weeks. They haven't really done that well. So I'd be delighted with a draw. I'd be delighted with a draw purely because that just puts another point on the board, and we get a bit more confidence going into Millwall. Where I think if you have another day like we did or evening like we did against Preston, where everybody's up for it, then we could easily win that game. I think the way against Swansea, bit more of an unknown. Again, these are another one of these teams like Hull that have been in the Championship for quite some time since they came down from the Premiership and never really done anything more than mid-table. So they look impressive on the face of it, but I think a Pompey side playing well could definitely cause them problems. So I'm going to go for 2 draws and a win, 2 away draws and a win for 5 points. And I think to get looking at the long term for staying up in this league, I think if we can get 12 points before the 1st of January, that puts us on 24 points. And then we're halfway through the season with half roughly the amount of points we need. You usually need 50 or 52 to stay up, but that would give you an average points return of 48 to 50 points. So that could very well keep us up. So we'll have to see what happens, gents. Thank you very much for joining me again this evening. Interesting and knowledgeable as usual. So thank you very much. We will record again in 2 weeks' time. I hope everyone enjoys the next 3 games and play up Pompey, and we'll see you all again very soon. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, gents.
Cheers.
And yeah, cheers.